This video talks about JVP waveform. Now, it's quite easy to understand JVP waveform. Sometimes we tend to forget, which one is which. So that's why this is my method to my madness, to be able to remember the JVP waveform. Now, the JVP waveform is quite picturesque. It's like there's a big peak here and a small peak, and then there's a big peak. It's like a twin peak of a mountain or something, followed by another mountain. So let's say this peak that we have here, the first peak that we have here, we call it A. And then there is a big descent. Let's call it X. And then there's a smaller peak. Let's call it C. And then there is a big descent. Let's call it X prime. And then there is another peak here, big peak. Let's call it V. And then there is a big drop here again. Let's call it Y. Okay, so these are the naming. Now let's see what's happening. Let's say we start with atrial contraction as our landmark. Okay, forget about this diagram for now. So let's see what's happening. What happens when atria contracts? Blood from the atria moves to the ventricle, right? It puts pressure onto the vein because atria is contracting. So the A wave is the pressure, the back pressure that the atria is exerting on the vein when the atria is contracting. Okay, so that's for atrial contraction. So you can say A for A. Atrial contraction is giving us A wave. It's nice, right? So right after atria contracts and before the tricuspid closes, right? Atria contracts, blood going from the atria to the ventricle, and tricuspid is about to close. That's when the atria starts to relax, okay? So this descent that we have here is because of atrial relaxation. So X for relax, X for X descent, okay? So X for X. See how much symmetry there is between the action and the peaks? Alright, so what's happening after atrial relaxation? Now our tricuspid is going to close. Once the tricuspid closes, it puts pressure back onto the atria, and that atrial pressure kind of flows back onto the veins. As a result, giving a little bit of peak on the veins again, and we can feel it in the JVP. And that's our C wave is. So C, tricuspid, C for C. That's a C wave for tricuspid. Okay, so we have gone through three. We have three left. Now what happens after tricuspid closes, after it contracts? The next thing that happens is, by the time tricuspid closes, our ventricle is full, and now our ventricle is ready to contract. Okay, once the ventricle contracts, it kind of drags the tricuspid with it. It drags the tricuspid down with it because there's so much pressure by the right ventricle. Okay, that pull of pressure downwards causes our X prime. This one, I'm sorry, I cannot really match to anything. It's just when the right ventricle is pushing, it's pulling the tricuspid with it a little bit, causing the next descent. Okay, now what happens after our right ventricle is contracting? The next thing that happens is the atria starts filling. Well, when the ventricle is about to finish contract, the atria is already filling, okay? And then that filling pressure that onto the right atria with the tricuspid closed eventually puts pressure onto the atria and then back onto the vein. I'm going to repeat that one more time. So when we are filling the atria, the blood from the veins are filling, and the tricuspid is closed, it keeps filling, and a point comes when the atria is almost full, and that filled pressure puts the pressure back onto the veins, right? And that pressure that is felt back onto the veins is our V wave. So from venous filling of the right atria with the tricuspid closed gives our V wave. Now once the once the atria is all filled up to the brim, it opens the tricuspid and blood from the atria flows back onto the ventricle and the atria becomes completely empty. That emptying kind of allows more blood to come to the right atria, and that's why the pressure drops in the JVP, because it's letting the blood inside the atria. That's why that emptying with the Y, the emptying causes our Y descent. Okay, and then this process continues from atrial contraction again. Now, so I told you I'm going to make this easy for you to remember. So the way I remember it is AX, CX with the X prime, VY. A is atrial contraction, X is atrial relaxation, C is tricuspid contraction, X prime is right ventricular contraction, V is venous filling, and Y is atrial emptying. So that is my interpretation of JVP waveform.